Whoops. Oh.
That's it.
That's it. I said it was short.
Yeah.
Now I have somehow messed up. There we go. Let's just sit there for a moment. Many of you also know that Banff Center has a long tenure in supporting not just artists, but leaders across all sectors. It's gone through many different iterations of names, but there is a leadership training division at Banff Center. Started a little bit more as kind of a baby B school in a lot of ways, similar kinds of training, and there weren't a lot of business schools in Canada when Banff and the amazing David Layton began those programs. So through those training programs, we support leaders who also go on to have impact in our communities in all economic sectors. And I'm very happy to say that we have committed to relaunching or re-embracing something that many of you may recall. It was called Arts Administration then, but we did have a history of running arts administration training programs at Banff Center, and we are now launching in the fall of 2017 a program that we're calling Global Cultural Leadership Training Programs. So stay tuned for that. So I thought today I would take a little bit of a leadership lens through this creative environment that we all live in. Leadership now requires a set of skills and abilities that do rely on the creative imagination. There are probably very experienced and credentialed leadership training people in this room today, so I'm not going to, purport to be an expert in the field. But people are kind of playing fast and loose with that word creative, right? Do you ever get a little kind of tired of creative, but definitely there's lots and lots of leadership training books that are using that word creativity. They're afraid they will be left behind in the race for resources in this new economy if they don't bring creativity to their leadership. So I feel really lucky and privileged to have been able to have experienced some wonderful mentors in my career that have helped me learn and appreciate these attributes, and in no particular order or without any as I say, academic rigor per se. I decided that today I would talk a little bit about these 4 qualities in creative leadership. So there's, as I say, many ways that others have written about in the field of leadership and creativity. You may be thinking, well, of course, great leaders, creative leaders, they need to be collaborative, probably disruptive, clear and focused in everything they do. But it's not just about recognizing or having the skills, it's how we deploy them. So I'm going to use just some very specific examples, very few. So let's start with collaboration. So how many of you are familiar with this beautiful public space in downtown Toronto, often better known as, how do I get to the Hockey Hall of Fame? Don't tell Mr. Calatrava that. This is the beautiful Brookfield Place Calatrava Atrium in Toronto. When I was working at Luminato, we wanted the festival to allow the people of Toronto as well as visitors to the city to discover art anywhere. I coined a phrase that stuck, actually. I said to the media shortly after my arrival that the festival wanted its audience to sometimes have what I called accidental encounters with art. And this meant taking art outside of the theaters and galleries, and I know you had some probably fabulous conversations about that yesterday. And in order to do that, we needed to collaborate extensively with public spaces throughout the city. Sometimes people were very eager to work with us, and other times not so eager. Other times we encountered tons of red tape, like at Union Station and other municipally owned facilities, but we persevered. And some of you may know that actually Luminato itself was and remains to this day very motivated as a city building exercise. There was an incredible program that occurred while I was still working in the United States, but read a lot about, called the Super Build program, where a bunch of visionary chairs, volunteer chairs of boards and executive directors, did something not always that we do well in our field, which was they got together and they decided maybe it would be better if we went together as 7 important cultural organizations within our city and approached government and said, how about we ask you collectively to make a commitment, and we will figure out, we each have projects that need to be done. Out of that, as you may know, grew the Four Seasons Center, the renovated Art Gallery of Ontario, the Gardner Museum, the National Ballet School, the ROM, Crystal, et cetera, et cetera. So the civic leader business founders, volunteers of the Illuminato Festival said, well, that's all wonderful. Now we've just invested $1 billion in this cultural infrastructure super build. What are we going to do with those spaces? I said, when I first met with them and they were asking me if perhaps I would be interested in coming back to my original home of Toronto to start the festival, I said, so it sounds like you're looking for the software that's going to animate that hardware you just built. And that's the way we looked at it, that Illuminato was just going to be this, no, we didn't have any spaces of our own. Collaboration was inherent in the idea of the festival because we were there to actually bring many of these spaces to life and many public spaces to life. So we went to Brookfield Place, and as you can imagine initially, no. How could you even think of doing something in this cathedral of beauty? And it is a beautiful space. So we worked with them and worked with them. We talked them into it, and we decided that we had a stunning proposal. We've been working with the artist David Rokeby on a piece called Long Wave. And there it is in sorry, there's a little red line down the middle just to show you two views of this incredibly large sculptural installation called Long Wave. So I use that as an example of how, you can't give up. Many of you work in the municipal environment where you do have to be conscious of the guidelines and the rules and so on. But when I had to convince the property owner, Brookfield, that this, sacred, iconic Calatrava space would not be sullied by this installation of temporary artworks, but in fact it would be enhanced. Well, guess what happened next? They didn't want us to take it down. So I said, well, that's also contrary to the creativity that we're trying to bring to the Illuminato Festival. It's meant to be temporary. It's meant to have the thousands and thousands of workers who come into that building every single day see their public space and their workspace in a different way. Well, they said, okay, well, all right, reluctantly they let us take it down. And I didn't bring pictures, but if you go on the Illuminato website, you'll see we subsequently animated that space in different ways, both hanging and ground-based installations for the next series of at least 5 or 6 years. The workers in the banks and the surrounding areas began to realize, oh, it's not going to be forever, but began to look forward to it. And I'm proud to say, and this is what I want to share with you, the kind of impact we can have. Brookfield now has a tremendously active and well-staffed division of public art as a big corporation. And it's really nice to see that we were able to play a small part in that. So there's one example from my background of collaboration. And then I said, how about disruption? How about disruption as a creative leader? Again, I'm using a public art example, but I just happen to love this installation. To me, Kurt Pertschke's Red Ball was definitely a step up from the Yellow Duckies. Everyone wanted to sell us the Yellow Duckies. I was like, no, it's been done, not gonna do it. And then we heard about this project. So this massive red ball, and you see people interacting with it here, actually would be inflated, installed in the dark of night, and then taken down and reinstalled somewhere else in the city. Commercial radio stations were starting, completely unprompted by us. It just went viral on its own. To start these contests of spotting the red ball, things that we kind of suspected would happen. But here's another example of the accidental encounters with art, seeing your everyday spaces in a different way, and Illuminato's passion, as I know many of you have, for disrupting the daily norms. And there we are in Old City Hall. People were calling us saying, can we get married in front of the red ball? So, what's stopping you? I don't know, go ahead, do whatever you want. And we're going to play a little video of the way people interacted with Red Ball.
Illuminato is a 10-day multidisciplinary arts festival. We feature music, theater, dance, film, literature. It's a little bit of everything. And what we really like about this festival is it's not only about coming and watching a show, it's actually about being engaged and participating.
The project started as a commission to work with an architectural space. So at the very beginning of it, it was really an opportunity to go to a city and look at the built environment. You know, people who see it have not seen any of the media, or they haven't seen any of, you know, they don't know what it is, but they see it, they stop, maybe they want to get a photo, they ask somebody what it is, or they just sort of drive by wide-eyed, you know.
It's really focused on the city of Toronto and based in the city of Toronto. What we've tried to do is not only make use of the plethora and richness of Toronto's artists, but also the incredible venues that have been built over the last couple of years.
That was the festival's first artistic director, Chris Lorway, then went on to a great career in other organizations in Toronto and recently abandoned us to run the Bing Concert Hall in the Bay Area of San Francisco. So I love the one of the person running up and jumping at the ball. Every time I look at it, I think, oh, it's a wonder we didn't get sued. And honestly, I am not a red ball fetishist. You know, it was complete coincidence that Rokeby and Pershke both had a notion that did involve a red ball. So people thought we had developed some kind of theme at Illuminato. So I will go back a little later to some of my time in the United States, but first I'm going to talk about my beloved last year and a half in Banff. And I'm going to talk about bringing clarity to your creative leadership. Whoops. Clarity has no videos, apparently. This, actually, I'm going to get to Banff in a little bit. Clarity, I have a story to tell that sometimes makes people uncomfortable, but I think is a good example of this. It certainly at the time made some of my staff uncomfortable. I was at Lincoln Center and we were about to launch a really comprehensive program to do a collaboration between multiple arts organizations. It was audience development. I was still in the marketing functional area at that point in time. But I was the senior person in the room and we were the largest organization at Lincoln Center, and we brought all these partners together. We were sitting in a conference room at Lincoln Center, and people started introducing themselves and saying, you know, what organizations they were from. And we got a couple of minutes into the meeting and I said, I'm sorry, can we hold on for a moment? Yes, what? I said, I'm not quite sure why you and you are in this consortium. And my staff started squirming. It's like, oh, it's just being rude. I said, I'm not being rude, but I don't actually see that you're going to get a lot out of this particular collaboration. And I just want to be really clear from the outset. How are we going to accomplish this project? And we really love you and we love your organization, and maybe further down the road there'll be a great opportunity for us to collaborate. But I need to bring some clarity. This will not succeed if we have people around the table who aren't going to get anything out of it, because how motivated are they going to be? It's the old, you know, weakest link kind of situation. So there was a little pause while my staff, I think, squirmed uncomfortably and felt really awkward. And the two organizations involved stood up and said, oh, thank God, I'm so glad you said that. Because in their hearts they knew, you know, we can't make this a successful project if we have people in the room who really aren't going to be able to be committed to it. So I just use that as a small example of, don't be afraid to bring clarity, crystal clarity. You know, we tend, as many of us, probably everyone in this room is a mission-driven kind of organization, or is in a mission-driven kind of job. And I know you go to conferences and hear about how to avoid mission creep and how to make sure you stay, clear with your direction. But it can be difficult. We do want to be all things to all people so often. But you really don't be afraid. Be bold. Be clear about your objectives, and don't be afraid to bring that clarity to the groups you create and the teams you build. I'm going to talk a little bit now about what I've been doing with the last year and a half. of my life. I arrived at Banff at an interesting time for the organization. There had been some disruption, for sure. Not necessarily the good kind, like Red Ball. But like any large, complex organization, over time, particularly one with the breadth of activities that Banff Center has, and certainly in Sarah, we had an amazing VP of Arts for almost 8 years, I suppose, at Banff, who knows well the complexity of the place. So the challenge of focus is to say no piece of the organization is diminished if we actually go very strongly and very publicly to the marketplace and say, this is the singular thing, really, that we stand for. So I was thinking about that a lot, even as I was a candidate for the position, and you get those inevitable search committee questions of, what would you do if you came in to move this $62 million organization forward? So I gave them a few of my ideas, some of which involved a refresh of the brand, very, very strong, incredible Heather Cooper, I believe, Sarah will correct me if that's not right, logo that had gone through some iterations over the years, the Three Mountains. But 35 years that logo had served the organization, so I thought that might be something we should look at. And then who here, I'm gonna flip this question, because otherwise I suspect too many hands would go up. Who in this room has not done strategic planning in the past 5 years? Okay, that's what I suspected. One. Oh, you're in for a treat. It will come. So I arrived in March, and in April, had my first board meeting and presented to the board a desire to engage truly one of the best brand agencies in the world, Pentagram, out of New York. They did the Brooklyn Academy of Music logo, MoMA, the MAD, Saks Fifth Avenue, Citibank. They don't just do the arts. They do the arts to reward their hard-working creative staff who actually would like to not work on the Verizon logo once in a while. And then very shortly after that, within a month after that, engaged another extraordinary strategic planning firm who work in cultural strategic planning around the world. And we began working on the strategic plan. So those of you who did not put up your hands, tears are shed, right? It's very difficult, and a large organization like Banff, quite a few new staff, a little bit of recent administrative disruption, putting people in the room and just bringing the rigor to the exercise. And a lot of it is about cutting away the things and giving people permission to focus. A lot of times people say, oh, strategic planning, especially in creative fields, you're gonna put me in a straitjacket, you're gonna stifle all my creativity. And I always say to my teams, no, I am liberating you. When you have a strategic plan, you have a roadmap. You can go off-road occasionally, at least you know what you're deviating from, and you can come back to it. Gives you permission to, with external stakeholders, say, wow, that's a fascinating idea. It's not really aligned with our strategic plan right now, but we're gonna keep this in the back of our minds. And sometimes there are genuinely good ideas that really aren't aligned with your plan, but it really does give you a roadmap, which is great. So we were incredibly proud of and remain proud of the diversity of what happens in Banff. It's both our strength and of course our challenge. And we're still working on the 30-second elevator speech. What is Banff Center? Why would I go there? What do you do? Who are you? What do you do? But we're a lot closer than we were because we got in the room, and with the conference division, which is still a significant part of our activity, some of you may have attended conferences at Banff Center. Obviously the artistic and cultural activities we do there, and also the leadership training division. So how do you say to this family of businesses, you're all very important, and we can in one sentence or in one branding exercise represent you all equally. Well, the fact is, we had to, in my view, when we got there, over tears, and I think quite a few bottles of red wine, and agreed that collectively as a leadership team, and then we had staff involved, we had working groups, all the stuff you have to do in strategic planning, and we have close to 500 staff at Banff Centre. But we really worked very hard on saying, are we all committed to putting arts and culture, our founding mission, right at the forefront of what we stand for here at Banff Centre? And that's how the Banff Centre became Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity. And you know, we've had many iterations of names over the years. The Leadership Division has been called, I think, the School of Management, the School of Continuing Education, all kinds of different names. And so we thought we do need to bring some clarity to this. And it was such an amazing and rewarding breakthrough moment when our Conference Division VP and our Leadership VP, it sounds so simple, but you know how hard it is to end up with those 5 words on a page, and then you go on to the mission statement. And when we put those 5 words up there, and we actually, after lots of conversation, what is our business, what do we do, who do we want to be, how do we work better together? It was a very siloed organization, as many post-secondary institutions are. Where can we be better at collaborating between divisions? And every single division head looked at those words, Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, and said to me, and to the great relief of our strategic planning consultants, I can see myself in that statement, and my staff will see themselves in that statement. That's partly due to the all-embracing nature of the word creativity. So that was very helpful in getting us to that point. So we did a lot of talking about putting arts and culture back at the heart and in the name of the organization. We remain proud of the diversity, of course, but what the natural outcome of that then, through more planning and beating up the working groups and them coming back and reporting back to us and so on, was that it became easier and easier to see places and intersections where all of our activities can actually be mutually reinforcing, instead of divisions fighting over resources and assets. So believe it or not, I'm already getting to final thoughts, because I'd rather have a little conversation than have me continue to talk at you. So, creativity is not a frill. That's the Lincoln Center campus, and it's more current state after a decade-long redevelopment that I was there at the beginning of. So apologies to anyone, because I do want to share this again, who was at a Walrus talk in December that I gave in Calgary, because I'm going to use a couple of the same stories to wrap up and then start our conversation. So first, a quote, and as I say, a couple of people in the room have heard this one before. Who knows the famous Winston Churchill quote, when he was asked why he wasn't diverting funds from the arts to pay for the war? And he says in response, then what would we be fighting for? And in my research for that Walrus talk, I discovered that apparently Winston Churchill never did say that. It's become this apocryphal tall tale of some kind. It would have been great if he did. And what he did say, though, and this one I have absolute proof of through some very diligent Google research. He did say in April of 1938, he was commenting about painting and sculpture at a talk he gave at the Royal Academy. The arts are essential to any complete national life. The state owes it to itself to sustain and encourage them. Ill fares the race which fails to salute the arts with the reverence and delight which are their due. I wish we still talked like that. So what does that mean for us and for great creative leaders today in our sector or in other sectors? As I say here, it means that creativity can never be a frill. It's the backbone of our cities and our towns and our great leaders. And so I want to thank all of you for the work you do in this regard, because I know I don't need to share this slide with you. So thank you for what you do on behalf of that every day of your lives. And now I'm going to close with a final story that I also shared at that Walrus talk, because the topic was resilience in cities, and I was the token arts and culture person. And this is a story about cultural resilience. It is from my time at Lincoln Center. I was interim president at the time, and I received a call from then New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. It was 3 days following the 9/11 attacks on the Twin Towers, and he called Lincoln Center board chair, the iconic opera star Beverly Sills, and my boss. I was participating in the conversation. He was, by the way, a huge opera fan, generally an arts fan, and really was a great mayor for culture. And Mayor Giuliani told us that we had to open the theaters. And I said, Mr. Mayor, Your Honor, all of the artists who were scheduled to appear on our stages this weekend or through the week are all stranded. They're in Europe or they can't fly in. And I was doing the non-creative thinking. I was looking at our season brochure, knowing all the performances that had been planned could not take place. I will not use the expletive he used, so use your imagination. He said, Janice, we're in bleep bleep New York City. It's the cultural capital of the bleep bleep world. Don't you have some friends? So I said, I actually do have some friends. They're called the Emerson String Quartet. They live right up the street, and they can't get out of New York City. So we called the Emersons. They came and they performed at a free concert at Avery Fisher Hall. It was broadcast live on PBS. Beverly delivered some beautiful remarks in advance. And, it was the mayor's appreciation of creativity that actually helped many in the cultural communities to rally and rebuild the community. I think that was a solid example of creative leadership. And then I will quote him as I have put up here on this slide. The people of New York City need the beauty of music and the comfort of gathering in communal spaces now more than ever. I can't work on the restoration of the city without harnessing the power of our cultural spaces. So thank you again for this invitation and for all you do every day to harness the power of our cultural spaces in Canada. Thank you.